One of the most interesting changes in the GPU market for June of 2024 is the introduction of some new AMD game bundles where you get two big AAA games bundled in with an RX 7800 XT or 7700 XT. And the prices on these GPUs have come down considerably since launch, especially for the 7700 XT. Now, game bundles only matter if you're interested in the games. The 4 games available are Lies of P, Company of Heroes 3, Starfield, and Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, and you get to choose any 2 out of those 4. Unless you live in Japan, you only get to choose one of them for some reason. But now, you may not be interested in these, in which case, okay, don't factor that into your GPU purchasing decision. I like Souls-like games, and Lies of P is one of the better Souls-like games out there, so I can vouch for that one. And again, depending on your taste, some of these other games could be pretty interesting to you as well. So keep that in mind when you think about your purchases. Sorry, my kids are running around so much upstairs here. That's how we roll on the channel. Now, what would these be competing against on the current market? Well, the 7700 XT has had a massive price drop to $370 at the lowest, and it does go up from there, but its MSRP when it launched was $450. So it's come way down, which I think makes it extremely interesting against the NVIDIA competition, like the 4060 Ti, which is currently sitting at about $309. The 4060 Ti has a major problem. It only has 8 gigabytes of VRAM, whereas the 7700 XT, again, which costs about the same, has 12 gigabytes of VRAM. Now, does that matter? Expect a dedicated video on this from me in coming up soon, because I just finished my testing of the 7700 XT up against the 8 gigabyte and 16 gigabyte versions of the 4060 Ti. And the thing is, in many games, no, it doesn't really matter that you only have 8 gigabytes of VRAM, but the 7700 XT is just faster. However, there are games where even at 1080p resolution, we're seeing problems trying to run max settings at on the 8 gigabyte card. For example, Horizon Forbidden West at 1440p very high settings using DLSS or FSR quality. You can see the 7700 XT is faster, and the 8 gigabyte card is falling behind the 16 gigabyte card because it's running out of VRAM. Otherwise, they perform identically. And then you could see even if you try to run very high settings without DLSS quality, again, you're seeing that issue, especially in the 1% lows, which means you're getting a lot more stutters on that 8 gigabyte card. And some people say it doesn't matter at all at 1080p. Well, in many games it doesn't, but in some games it does. At 1080p very high settings, we actually are getting more stutters on the 8 gigabyte card, and it's underperforming the 16 gigabyte counterpart, whereas the 7700 XT with 12 gigabytes of VRAM is not having that issue. So sure, you can always turn down graphic settings, like going down to 1080p high settings, and then that's going to get that VRAM issue under control. But the point is, if you buy an 8 gigabyte card in 2024, and you're planning on hanging on to this for a few more years, you will be running into games where even at 1080p and 1440p at reasonable settings that the card is otherwise powerful enough to deliver, you will start running into issues with 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Yes, you can always turn down settings. No, it's not the end of the world, but it is something to think about when you're making your purchasing decision. And even when you are at settings where the VRAM's under control, the 7700 XT does tend to just be faster, unless you're using ray tracing. So let's talk about that. So if I go to a game like Avatar, which uses a reasonable level of ray tracing, a good example of what games designed around the current generation of consoles are able to do for ray tracing, then these actually kind of just even out. There's not a huge difference in performance between all of them. But then if you move into more demanding ray tracing titles, like maybe Alan Wake 2, for example, especially if you're trying to play it at 1440p resolution with RT high settings, even going all the way down to something like DLSS balanced, the 4060 Ti's are crushing the 7700 XT in relative performance, but they're only delivering around 30 FPS anyway, which probably isn't the way you really want to play the game. And also, the 8 gigabyte card is delivering terrible 1% lows and stutters on the frame time graph compared to the 16 gigabyte 4060 Ti, indicating that 8 gigabytes of VRAM really isn't enough for these settings anyway. So what I'm trying to say is that at this performance level, heavy ray tracing is out of the picture, and lighter ray tracing workloads, the 7700 XT really isn't at a big disadvantage. And just in general, it's nice to have the 12 gigabytes of VRAM and just more raw performance. Again, expect a dedicated video showing all of this coming up soon on the channel because I've completed that testing. But what I'm basically saying is the 7700 XT versus the 4060 Ti 8 GB card, I would definitely go with the 7700 XT, especially if you have any interest at all in any of these, or even 2 of these 4 games. Kind of sweetens the deal on that. So I think that's looking like a pretty good deal right now. But what about that 16 GB version of the 4060 Ti? Well, if it costs the same as the 7700 XT, then you might have a bit more of an argument. However, the 7700 XT is still just generally faster. But you might be attracted to the NVIDIA feature set, that kind of thing. But the 16 GB card costs a lot more. It's up to you have to go up to about $450 or higher to get one. And the problem with that is that puts it up closer to the price of the 7800 XT. So that would be a more relevant performance difference. And the 7800 XT also has 16 GB of VRAM, costs just a little bit more. So I would say they're roughly in the same price class, and adds in a whole lot more performance on top of what we already saw from the 7800 XT. And again, you get the game bundle thrown in on top of that as well. And so I've got to say the 16 GB 4060 Ti would be a reasonable competition if it cost what the 8 GB card did. But it doesn't. It costs closer to 7800 XT. So I've got to give my under $400 recommendation to the 7700 XT and my under $500 recommendation to the 7800 XT, especially with those game bundles thrown in if you're at all interested in those games. However, if we go up in price past this point, I think it's where NVIDIA starts to make more sense. But let's think about which card makes the most sense. So if we go up to the 4070, you're now getting 12 GB of VRAM, which in my testing is actually pretty much fine at 1440p and 1080p. Starts to run into some issues occasionally at 4K. And again, you're borderline on a lot of games at 12 GB of VRAM, so, depending on how long you want to hang on to the card, it's something to think about. But in my opinion, at least, and in my testing, not just opinion, not that big of a deal to be at 12 GB at 1440p, at least in the games that are available today. However, the problem is the 4070 itself costs $540, but the 7800 XT is as low as $470, and the 7800 XT generally is slightly faster when you're not ray tracing, and the 4070 is still a bit underpowered for those heaviest ray tracing workloads. But the 4070 Super gets you a 10 or 15% more performance, kind of giving you that bit of extra headroom to make a difference in those heavier ray tracing titles. However, at $580, I would say its closest competition from AMD is actually the 7900 GRE, not the 7800 XT. That comes in at about $530 on the lowest price models, and then $550 and up, kind of going from there. So 7900 GRE does cost a bit less than the 4070 Super, and it has 16 GB of VRAM instead of 12. However, if you're targeting 1440p or below, I'm not convinced that, at least right now, that 12 GB of VRAM is that big of an issue. And again, I have dedicated videos on this, so definitely take a look at those if you want more of my full thoughts and a whole bunch more games tested. And the thing is that the 4070 Super is starting to be just strong enough that those NVIDIA feature sets, like the heavier ray tracing workloads, start to be more interesting. Now, I'm interested in single-player games like Cyberpunk. Maybe you're not as interested in that, and that's not as big of a selling point for you. But for example, 1440p RT overdrive mode with DLSS quality, which still looks quite good at 1440p. 50 FPS-ish, in our a built-in benchmark, but then kicking on frame generation, which it has enough VRAM and kind of baseline performance to use, gets you up to a reasonable experience using those big feature sets. So I think the 4070 Super is kind of the lowest end, although it's hard to call it, I'm not calling it low end, but the kind of the lowest end NVIDIA GPU where I think its big feature sets start to pay off. And might be a big selling point for you. So I would say that if I was going to buy an NVIDIA GPU, I would try to go up to the 4070 Super as kind of my minimum, where I think that kind of feature set starts to pay off. Now, if you don't care about those feature sets, then AMD's cards like the 7900 GRE are probably still giving you more VRAM and a bit more raw performance for a little bit less money, so you could still go that route if you're not that into that feature set difference. Now, that being said, I think that if you're looking for an NVIDIA GPU where you're not really making any compromises in terms of performance and VRAM, the 4070 Ti Super is getting you that 16 gigabytes of VRAM. The problem is you have to pay a lot more money to get there. You're going up to about $800. But if you do go up to the 4070 Ti Super, you're getting the 16 gigabytes of VRAM, at which case I don't think you have anything really to worry about VRAM related for a long time to come. And you're getting even a bit more performance where those heavy duty, RT situations and things like that are even more, doable. But again, you're paying quite a bit of money to get there. That being said, you're getting close to the performance of a 4080 or 4080 Super, which costs closer to $1,000 without having to make that jump. So I think the 4070 Ti Super is the most expensive NVIDIA GPU I would really recommend before just jumping to the 4090 if price just isn't really an issue for you. And that's around the $800 point. Now, is it worth getting? Well, you could get something like a 7900 XT for less money, which is a bit faster in non-ray tracing workloads, although I wouldn't say mind-blowingly so, where it's making like a massive difference in your overall gaming performance. But then your 4070 Ti Super does, like I said, get you those, ray tracing experiences. I'm getting an ad on my own video. Are you kidding me, YouTube? Apparently, I either need to get YouTube Premium or run an ad blocker or something. But you guys, you should whitelist my videos on your ad blocker. Anyway, again, I've got head-to-head comparisons on things like these, where you can see that again you're getting a pretty good experience with these heavier ray tracing experiences on the 4070 Ti Super, whereas the AMD alternatives, while they do cost less, don't really offer you those same kind of premium experiences in certain titles. But it's definitely not every title. So again, if you're not too drawn towards that kind of experience, you could save $100 and get yourself a 7900 XT and get similar performance, a bit more VRAM. Not that I think 16 versus 20 really matters anytime in the near future. But again, you could save yourself some money if you want to go that route. But again, like I said, I think the 4070 Ti Super makes sense if you're interested in that premium feature set and you want to save money by not going the 4080 Super route. Now, if you do want to spend more money, you could go up to, again, this 4080 Super or the 7900 XTX. The 7900 XTX is available as low as $900, although most models do cost more than that. And again, that would put you up around the 4080 Super, which you can get as low as $970. At this price point, while that is a $70 price difference, I'm not sure people are too swayed by a $70 price difference when you're already spending $1,000. In which case, personally, I would rather have the 4080 Super. While the XTX does have more VRAM, I'm not concerned about 16 gigabytes of VRAM. The 4080 Super is capable of these, heavy RT experiences and things like that. And then if you're not using ray tracing, maybe you're looking at something like Starfield 1440p Ultra. Yeah, the 7900 XTX in my testing is like 6% faster. But does 6% really change your experience overall? That's what I'm kind of saying, right? Like the 4080 Super can offer you certain experiences and feature sets, better upscaling, things like that, better ray tracing performance that might change your experience in certain games, whereas the 7900 XTX is slightly faster, but not by a margin that I think really makes a meaningful difference. Yeah, it saves you $70, but again, I think at this point I'd be kind of sold on that. But again, you might, like I said, rather than go up to the 4080 Super, just stick with that 4070 Ti Super, because the other thing is we're starting to hit the price point where, again, when NVIDIA launches their new generation of GPUs, most likely at the beginning of 2025 or possibly even the end of 2024, it's likely to be a 5080 and or 5090, where if we're at this $1,000 price point, you might want to hold off for that unless you're super desperate to build right now. So anyway, just mentioning that. And then the 4090 certainly offers you the most performance, but it doesn't make any sense from a value proposition. But if you're wanting the best, especially 4K gaming experience, you could spend $1,700 and get yourself a 4090. The 4090 does absolutely, it's the only card that really gives a great 4K ray tracing experience in the heavier titles, although you'll still be relying on upscaling and frame generation for those heaviest ray tracing experiences at 4K. But again, it is generally 30% or more faster than the 4080 and 4080 Super in a lot of situations. So it does definitely offer you something the other ones don't. but again, it costs quite a bit of money. Now, that being said, I started this video talking about cards that are close to, $350 to $400 range. What if you're looking for something less than that? Again, that's where I think AMD makes a lot of sense when priced against the NVIDIA competition. So for example, again, I already said the 7700 XT makes a lot of sense at $370. But if you're going to go below that price point, the next step down in the current generation is the 7600 XT. The problem with this one is that while it offers 16 gigabytes of VRAM, it offers less performance than AMD's previous generation 6750 XT or 6700 XT, which is sometimes still available, sometimes not. But again, these are available at a similar price point to I think I was filtering by which retailers were available. Last time I checked, this one was available closer to $300. So maybe it's not at this price point. Anyway, but the 4060 from NVIDIA is coming in around $300. Again, I don't like that it's an 8 gigabyte card. I think if that's the manufacturer. Are we filtering out the Amazon listings right now? Well, let me check the Amazon listings, because if I remember right, on Amazon, there we go. On Amazon, you can find a 6750 for about $310. Let's check the 6700 XT. The 6700 XT, okay, that almost looks like a scam listing. If this thing was actually available at $250, okay, maybe I was filtering out Amazon for scam listing reasons. So careful with that. Make sure it's shipped and sold by Amazon. That looks too low, but sometimes you can get these right around $300 and they're legit. That's why I sometimes filter out the Amazon listings when I do this, because there's a lot of scam listings on there. But anyway, they're pretty close in price to that 4060. And the 4060 is limited to that 8 gigabytes of VRAM. The 6750 XT comes in with that 12 gigabytes of VRAM, so does the 6700 XT. I don't have a 6750 XT. The 6700 XT is about 5% slower. Sure, the 4060 is better in these heavy ray tracing workloads, but you're only getting like 38 FPS here at 1080p RT overdrive, even using DLSS quality. So I'm not really sold on that. Again, at these lower performance tiers, I'm not really sold on those performance differences. Whereas if we look at something like, an Unreal Engine 5 game, I'm getting another ad on my own video. Okay, the ads on YouTube, guys, are getting kind of ridiculous. Anyway, so here we're seeing that the 6700 XT versus the 4060. 6700 XT is generally faster. It has more VRAM, and it, like I said, the ray tracing performance in heavy ray tracing workloads where the 4060 would have advantages, I'm not super sold at that price point. So around the $300 price point, I think I would go with the 6750 XT if you can find it for around that $300 price point. Something to keep your eye out for. Now, another thing to look at is, okay, what if we're going way below that? Well, the 7600 from AMD is about $250. It's less than a 4060. It's also only an 8 gigabyte card. But the thing is, it doesn't offer a lot that the previous generation 6650 XT doesn't offer. Man, that has to be a scam listing on Amazon. That doesn't look right. Okay, we're going back to like filter by Newegg or something like that, because yeah, that just doesn't seem correct. I'll need to look in that off camera to investigate. But yeah, a lot of times, unfortunately, on Amazon, you'll get sellers that are not Amazon, and they'll list things at prices you're not really getting them for. So be careful with that. So I'm gonna again filter by that. And so the 6650 XT. Oh man, do we not have any in stock right now? That would be unfortunate if that is the case. Do we have 6600s? Okay, we get some 6600s available as low as $190. So that would be somewhere you might want to look. Do we have any 6600 XTs? Okay, 6600 XTs available as low as $220. Again, these are not far off the performance of cards like the 7600 or even cards like the 4060. They're not like worlds apart. And at this price point, being way closer to $200 than $300, I think that's really where the value is. The last thing we'll talk about is, okay, you could look at Intel GPUs like the Arc A750, which is as low as $190. The drivers have been getting a lot better, but I would still say for a lot of buyers, especially if you're on an older platform. You're not sure if you have like ResizeBAR support, which is absolutely crucial for Intel GPUs. And then just in general, there's still a lot of games, like even big games like Starfield launched and just like didn't even work on Intel GPUs until months later. That's been the case for a variety of games at launch. So again, the driver situation is getting better for Intel, but I would still say that if AMD's offering something, or NVIDIA, but usually they're not, with similar performance at a similar price point, you'd have a lot less headaches just having things work on your AMD card at that price point. Anyway, so I would say that cards like the 6600, 6600 XT, and 6650 XT, when they're available, are going to be the best deals around $200. So hopefully, I think we've covered all of the price points now. So I would say, again, around the $200 price point, try to get a 6600 XT or 6650 XT for around $220. And then if you have to be below $200, the 6600 non-XT is probably the way to go, unless you want to be adventurous and try out an Intel GPU. Just be aware that you might have a lot more troubleshooting issues than you would with the AMD or NVIDIA counterparts. And again, those are getting you similar performance to cards like the 7600 and even the 4060 for a lot less money. If you are getting close to the $300 that a 4060 costs, I say, try looking for 6700 or 6750 XT if you can find them available for around that $300 price point. And then if you can stretch to $370, the 7700 XT, if I could type, like I said, makes a lot of sense against the 4060 Ti competition. And against the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte, I think the 7800 XT makes a lot of sense. However, once we start going up to closer to the $600 price point, I think the 4070 Super starts to make a case for itself based on the NVIDIA feature set and ray tracing advantages if you're interested in those types of games. And then beyond that point, I think the 4070 Ti Super is a standout in the NVIDIA product stack in that it finally gets you 16 gigabytes of VRAM and a whole lot of performance. Past this price point, you're getting a lot of diminishing returns, and you're starting to get into the point where you might really regret 6 months later having maybe been able to get something a lot more powerful for a similar price point with the launch of the 5080 or 5090. Again, we don't know that for sure. Yeah, so I would say kind of diminishing returns past this point. So the only highlight I would say is that the 4090 does just get you the best overall graphics card if you're not concerned about value, and it's incredibly powerful, and you'll be very happy with the performance that you're getting. So if you're not worried about the value, there you go. So that's my overall recommendations. Generally, AMD makes a lot of sense under $500, whereas NVIDIA starts making a lot more sense at $600 and up, where its feature set starts to come into play as you get more VRAM and more overall ray tracing performance for those things to kind of matter. Anyway, that's what I've got for you guys for my recommendations this month. Hopefully you guys found the video useful and or interesting, and I hope everybody has an excellent day.